So I wanted to throw this idea out there about outline and what it is. And I was also going to talk a little bit about the basics of overlapping. So if I'm just starting with a generic idea of form here, just going to get something up here for us to sort of deal with the model. In short order, our outline is going to get us into this form. And I'm using my half idea here, that the form is about half at the great trochanter, top of the pubis here. So this is typically true whether the model is, AJ's kind of lanky, and even if the model is, let's say, rounder, that this half thing works out nicely. So I have some semblance of what the figure is up here. So if I'm thinking about outline specifically to get me into the form here, and I start thinking about inside forms, like I have the head here, and I have a center line for the head, then I have a center line for the neck, and then I have a center line for the torso, and that's going to change as this goes down here. And it's about like this, and then it switches down here, comes down. There's like one for the leg too, kind of goes down the middle. This is kind of important because this is really like you have an outline and then you have this inside center line that runs down. So what happens when we start getting on the inside here is we oftentimes get into details, and sometimes we track the details and maybe we're not really thinking of what the big thing is doing. So let's say I get in here and I start doing the neck and I start carving it out and I start getting a little heavy here. And then maybe I come down here and I get the nipple in, but maybe I put it in hard. And then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I like that arm over there. So I go over here and I do a little bit of this. Then I come over here and then I come down here and I start carving out these inside shapes in the middle of the arm. Now, what's happening to my figure? Anyone can jump in here.
Being broken apart.
It's being broken apart, yep. And this is completely normal. Like everyone does this. They kind of get into this like cycle of what's important. So if I take this from the standpoint of going back to my outline and trying to establish an outline, if I just do one thing, which is to make my outline very clean and beautiful and clear, and in this case, I'm actually going to overstate it slightly. I'm going to do a Gumby figure here, meaning if I have a choice when I hit a spot like this, like let's look at the right in here at the edge of his torso. Do you notice what am I doing with this line?
Continuous.
It's continuous. Am I stopping at every little thing? Nope. It's almost like imagine there's cellophane around him and it's just kind of coating the outside. It's going to obliterate all of this individual stuff in there. Now what happens is this stuff that's in the center that I just did, like let's say on this arm, let's say I do this on this arm and I wrap it around. This outside line, if you just make a wrap out of it, it actually very neatly and very quickly brings the figure into a unity. Like magic. Like it's just so simple. Everything in the middle now is no longer like popping like this. Now it has like a clarity to it. So if I'm doing a quick sketch and I'm trying to maximize the amount of I'm trying to get the maximum amount of power out of the least moves. And I think very reductively about everything. I think two of my own personal philosophies come into play here. One is the Stoic philosophy that you're only dealing with the thing in front of you, and in this case that's this. It's not even the model. So if I can do the least amount of things to make this thing pop forward, that's what I'm going to do. And the second one is also kind of Stoic philosophy, which is we could be dead the next minute. So I don't have time to like get into something that I can't finish. So what am I going to do that has the most impact right now? So do the least that you can do here that has the most power. So on that idea, the overlapping idea comes into play here with the outline. So if I only have a few minutes, and let's say I started with an outline that takes me around him some kind of fashion here. I'm going to take us down to here. Yeah, for whatever it's worth, when I was an art student, that stuff was always bouncing around in my head. I was grieving at the time, and then I'm like, oh, well, I could be not here next week. So what do I really want to do that matters in my work? And it got me to sharpen up really quickly because it focused everything. So, out of a little bit of misery comes some good, I guess. So if I'm doing this, now we have the Gumby figure. There's really no overlappings to speak of. I put this one up here just to demonstrate that inside part. But pretty much it's really generic. This overlaps that, which is, it's fine. That overlaps that. But if I'm really getting into the inside of the form, if I had to pick one or two overlappings that were the most important to start with, like what would they be up there? Throw this out there, like what would you guys pick?
Well, the arms.
So the arms,
The
meaning
hand over the leg, and the arm, and the body in front of the bent arm.
yeah. All right, so we have both of those, and that actually makes sense. That's not a bad one, because yeah, now we know that's behind and that's in front. So your overlapping does all of that really quickly. Just by overlapping that, I'm already telling you what that thing is in space. I don't need to shade anything. And that's fabulous, because who wants to do all that work shading? Like, let's pretend time is precious. Shading takes time. So why would I want to do all that if I could just do this one thing and be done with it? So maybe the head over the neck, that's kind of an important one. And if I overlap that and I get into my inside shadow line, great. Now look at how much I've done with seconds. Am I worried about eyes, nose, mouth, etc., etc.? Nope. I can generically get in the side of the head there. Good, we have a turning point for the head. That was quick. But probably one of the biggest ones in here, to my mind, is if you take this idea of the torso being like an acorn or a candy kernel. Wait, candy corn. Candy. You guys get it. A legume or whatever for this. And I'm kind of starting to overlap by default, but I'm doing this so you guys can see what I'm thinking here. If I imagined this form as being straight on, and it had a center line and it was symmetrical left to right, that's kind of my baseline for the starting of the form. Now if it varies up there, now we want to know what it is. So where is it varying up there? Shoulder to hip. What's happening? Is one side of the hips going up higher than the other?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
This one's coming up, and the
Right.
shoulder's coming down, so he's crunching right there.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for the classic Michelangelo contrapposta thing happening here. So if I want to break into the inside of the form and I want one overlapping that means a lot, this one's kind of good, because if I start doing my hip thing, I'm exaggerating that shoulder slightly. That's fine. If I'm doing this, now I can twist this form a little bit this way. Watch the overlapping in the middle. Now this overlapping actually has some power to it if I turn this, especially if I turn this into a shadow line right there. And now I'm recalibrating it with my center. So I have an overlapping from the outline that is now turning into a shadow line. I'm going to take that down a little bit. But I'm thinking about what do I really want out of this experience here? What is the most meaningful overlapping here that I could pull out of this? In this case, I'm pretty happy with that as a choice. I think that makes sense. Do you guys see how this oblique here, as it comes up, it's actually this thin form?
Mm-hmm.
It has a thin form that actually breaks the light. It it doesn't have a shadow edge on it right here. That's how powerful that form is breaking right there, because the shadow edge runs all the way down. I'm going to be generic here and just say this goes all the way down like this, because we're being generic, so I can start this way. But that's generic form, this is specific form, and now the overlapping really makes sense. I've got one that really matters a lot, because it's telling me what the entire figure's doing instantly with that one little thing, shoulder to hip. So I'm always looking for the biggest one first if I have to be completely reductive this way, and you know, you're a stoic philosophy warrior. Even if you're not, then you know, you can still do it. So I'm going to build a little bit of shadow line here. And another very powerful overlapping, if I had to pick one, is this pelvic triangle. I spend an inordinate amount of time looking at this one area. I always find it tricky talking about this kind of thing because we're talking about the pubic area, but let's get past that for a second. Look at how this line comes up over here. Beautiful overlapping. This tells me that this leg is behind, that this leg is in front. This is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, because of how this overlaps. Do you guys see those lines there? It's not a perfect, if it was perfectly from the front and everything was equal, this triangle would be absolutely perfect. So when that is violated in any particular way, in this case this goes this way, now I know it has to be turning this way. If it was turning the other way, it would be something like that. That's why I look at this all the time, because it tells you everything that's happening up there. It's a very good indicator of that. So these are great ones, these 3. I'm not saying look at those all the time, but you're always looking for what's really telling me about what's really happening up there. Because this just, how much information did we get out of that one thing right there? Again, without modeling, we know about space now, just because of the overlappings. Okay, so let's get into one more thing here. I'm going to treat this as one unit here. See how this dark goes into this mid-tone? I'm just going to treat this as one dark shape here. So last week we talked about carving the dark shape out. As I come up here with my shadow line, I can just complete my overlapping for this. It's a nice little overlapping up there. And I would even say when you're doing these overlappings, do less but have it try to mean more. Because one good one is a very powerful thing, as opposed to a bunch that are just sort of slopped in. So now we have some form developing there. Like we did last week, we talked about flattening it out. And I want to do this a couple of ways here. One is this idea of hatching. So if I have a midline, if I have a shadow line down here on the form, and this is my, whatever the form is, you know, we're doing some kind of flattening in here. So one way to do this is to actually think of the idea of curving, what do we call these? Hatching lines. So they are not volume lines, but because we're actually using them as visible lines. Like this is my shading now. I'm starting in the dark, I'm hitting my core shadow line, and then I'm wrapping this around. You see how my line tapers? I'm pressing hard, and then I'm lightening, and I'm getting thinner. So this is kind of a sophisticated thing, but this was actually one of the ways old masters would learn how to shade. They would copy other people's hatching lines, and they would learn form that way by copying other people's drawings. And that's how people learned how to shade in the old days, when there weren't just models. It wasn't like you went to art class in 1650 and there was like models every day for 5 days a week for 3 hours a day. Like a student would copy an old master's work this way, and usually in pen and ink, and then they would sell the copies as the master's work in a fair or something, or some kind of market. So this works. This works really quickly, and you can actually print it, and it's easy. Like the effect I got from that in seconds is very powerful. So if I'm doing this up here, I could hypothetically do it somewhere on the leg, and then I'm wrapping around. So my suggestion for you guys today would be to pick a spot. If you want to thicken it up while you're doing it, you can still strengthen those lines. But just do it in one area and do a nice job with it. If this is, if I'm picking it up on the other side in some spots, you might have other shading that this might pick up on over here. And that's up to you if you want to really go around the leg the full way. My suggestion would be pick a spot you think you can really do and start wrapping it around that way. Don't hurry on this. Like, set your thing up, spend a minute making it really nice, because it'll look better than if you try to. Believe me, you're not gonna get all of him in this. Like, just please don't even try. Try to get a couple of really effective areas that look nicely, or just even one. That would be fabulous. The other way of treating form here, it's very simple, is to just do, if I have my shadow line here, instead of doing the hatching, you're doing like a soft gradation. So I'm rolling off the shadow line and I'm doing soft gradation, almost like, I hate to say it this way, but like a computer would be digitally. Like it's just a soft, smoky gradation with zero hatching. But you get this by really softly just smudging your pencil here. And because it's a quick sketch and we don't care how much further we're taking it, you can, be a 6-year-old and smudge it. It's fine. Like now we have something that turns the form really quickly.